Hey y'all, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are when you see this video. Thanks for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. It is August 13th, 2025. I have a story to share with you that is timely, which means I need to put this out before the Friday meeting just to see what happens. Okay, here we are. Kiev planning false flag attack ahead of Trump-Putin summit. Russia's defense ministry says Kiev is preparing a provocation in Kharkov region to frame Russian forces and disrupt the August 15 negotiations. Now, I don't know if you recall, but I did a video about a month or so ago about chemical weapons and a false flag event on that of setting something up for that and making it look like Russia had done it. I don't know if this is the same type of deal. We're going to find out. Russia's Ministry of Defense has alleged that the Ukrainian government is preparing a high-profile provocation intended to derail the upcoming Russian-American summit scheduled for August 15th. According to Moscow, the plan involves staging an attack in a frontline city and blaming it on Russian forces in order to create a damaging international media narrative. The Russian side asserts that Western journalists have already been brought into the Kharkov region in order to produce civilian-focused reports. On April 1st, 2022, the Zelensky government accused the Russian military of massacring civilians in the town of Bucha, near Kiev. Moscow maintains that the alleged massacres in March 2022 was a Ukrainian false flag operation designed to derail peace talks, which were taking place in Istanbul at the time. Moscow insists that the killings took place after its forces had left the town and has called for UN investigation. I have some actual articles on that issue of the Bucha the Bucha massacre. I don't know if you know who Eva Bartlett is. She's an independent journalist who was actually around there during that time. She came in person and she looked at that supposed mass grave area of one of those supposed ones that, I don't know if it was that one, but it was, I forget the name. I don't think it was the Bucha one. But the grave diggers there said that they were not mass graves. Each one is in their own coffins, their own, they're all set up, and there is none of this mass grave deal of where they were in that particular cemetery. In any case, we know that there's propaganda on both sides during wars and even not in wars. They really do that almost all the time now on everything, it seems. I'm not talking about any country, but especially ours. I always like to clean my house before telling other people about theirs, so that's why I always have my country I'm always more critical about. In any case, things like this happen, and you all are free to think whatever you want. Just remember that there's been a long, intense agenda and strategy of using Ukraine against Russia, and it's been going on for a long time, but I'll get into that later. According to information obtained through multiple channels, the Kiev regime is preparing a provocation aimed at disrupting the planned Russian-American talks scheduled for August 15th of this year. To this end, on Monday, August 11th, a group of foreign media journalists was transported by the SBU to the city of Chugev in the Kharkov region under the cover story of preparing a series of reports about residents of the city in the front line zone. Directly before the summit on Friday, the Ukrainian armed forces are reportedly planning a stage strike using drones and missiles on one of the densely populated residential areas or a hospital, with a large number of civilians casualties. The Western journalists brought in are expected to immediately document the incident. As a result of this provocation by the Kiev regime, All responsibility for the strike and civilian casualties will be assigned to the armed forces of the Russian Federation, with the goal of creating a negative media backdrop and conditions for derailing Russian-American cooperation on resolving the conflict in Ukraine. But let me just tell you, this sounds very plausible, very probable, very real, that this is a real danger, because we know that Ukraine is about to collapse. And Zelensky is still not, he thinks that Putin will fool Trump, and he and the EU are trying to come up with a way to side this, so that they don't want this to happen. The meeting. Although I'll tell you what McGregor says. But in any case, it's important to know that if you look at the history of what's been going on with NATO, with Russia, with Ukraine, and then even with Georgia before that, and they tried this in Romania as well, trying to turn these countries against Russia, it's not far-fetched. Let's just put it that way. That's how I see it. You all may not. That's fine. Okay, so let's go back in. There's actually another one that says this. Ukraine plotting new provocation or sabotage. And Ministry of Defense is saying this. Let's see. So they're saying the same thing here. Just another report on it. So we'll see. I'm going to go to this and just give you a little bit of information from Colonel Wilkerson. He just happens to bring up some things here that I thought were important. So I'm going to start right here.
If you look at history, even recent history, and by that I mean back to the beginning of the 1900s and even the beginning of the 1800s, if you look at that history, you understand that the people who have been incredibly independent of any national entity or any government in their military actions, partisans, if you will. Think about Tito in Yugoslavia. Think about the Nazis bringing, 40, 50,000 troops in and having them all just die or captured or whatever, and then sending more in and more. The most fierce partisans sometimes were the Ukrainians. And so what I say, and it's not just the Banderas types. It's just it seems to me at least, through history, they have been very, very good guerrillas, and they don't necessarily have a national affiliation when they're guerrillas. Now they latch on to Kiev or they latch on to whatever. So you've got that problem constantly if something's not done about it. In other words, what I've said before is if there were a peace and there were a line of that peace, whether it's a demilitarized zone or whatever, the Ukrainians would be the ones disturbing it, not the Russians. The Russians would be happy with what they got and guarding what they've got. But the Ukrainians would be constantly messing it up.
Okay, so obviously the intel agencies working with Ukraine was not too difficult if we had these type of, as he called it, guerrilla groups running around in Ukraine for decades, right? For showing history. So this story really isn't that far off, in my opinion. Is it? I'm going to show you another thing about, as we all know, what's going on with the West against Russia, India, and China, and all that, and the whole issue around the Middle East, around the Zangezur corridor and all that. I'm just going to give you his take on something here.
When you get to the Middle East, it's different. That's a much stickier issue for him.
Talking about Trump.
He has to be involved in that, and he is. How do you explain his willingness to embrace Giuliani, knowing that Giuliani is murdering thousands of people on a routine basis? How do you embrace Erdogan, who is a big backer of all of this? How do you embrace the people in Azerbaijan, this Aliyev regime? You know that this thing with Armenia has very little staying power. I don't see anything really good coming out of this. This is all about encircling Russia, splitting Russia from Iran. It's all the same strategy, but he's on that ride. He's strapped in. He's on the roller coaster. He can't get off. That's different. But I think in Eastern Europe, he's probably predisposed to say, look, I've done all I can do. I can't do anything else.
Yeah, so before that came up, what McGregor was talking about was that Trump doesn't really have a choice. I mean, he can say, I wash my hands of the whole Ukraine thing. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to be involved anymore. He could say all kinds of things, but it doesn't matter because those behind the scenes, those who have the power and the lobbies and do everything at the military-industrial complex, the intel agencies, they all already have their agenda and what they want to do towards Russia. So it really doesn't matter. He said it's gone back to like Trump's first term, where it didn't matter what he said. Even if he said we want troops out or we do start doing that, they won't do it. The people in this deep state won't do it. Okay, they're going to do what they want to do. They just ignore Trump's views. So that's what he's basically saying about this whole thing. And it, of course, makes sense because we all know that presidents have little power and that this has not changed under Trump. We wanted it to change. We all hoped for a change. But no, it's the same playbook. The same story every 4 years. So let's keep an eye out and see what happens before this meeting. If there's this false flag, we'll find out, won't we? Be very interested to see what happens on that. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you in this video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it was informative. And thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for following my channel. And I'll be back later. Until next time.